Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nadia and this is Nadia Reads. If you've been here before, you'll notice that I haven't recorded or posted a video since March, and that's because of depression. Basically, I fell into a reading slump and I wasn't reading enough books to record any videos or do any wrap-ups. But I am in a much better place now, and I felt that it was best to come back on here and record a video wrapping up everything that I read between March and now so that I could move forward with new video ideas and new wrap-ups and things like that. But even though I have been gone because of depression, it wasn't all that bad, and I did actually launch my little bookmark business. These are bookmarks that I have illustrated myself. I print them myself, I laminate them myself, and I am selling them via Etsy. I will include the link to my shop below in the description box if you would so like to browse them and perhaps buy a few. I will be launching some new designs soon. This is the initial run, so there's I think a couple of them sold out, but I will be replenishing that stock soon. And yeah, if you would like to browse them, the link to the shop will be below in my description box. I have also opened a Bookstagram account where I share what I'm currently reading as well as different scenes from my life and things like that. If you're interested in that, that will also be linked in the description box below, and I hope you'll follow me on there and we'll get to talking and, build a community. As I said, I haven't been reading very much at all. Most of these books are from March, where I was still trying to keep up with I was trying to keep up with the pace that I set up for myself in January and February, which I think this is sort of a yearly thing for me where it's like, it's a new year, I'm excited, I want to read a lot of books, I just set up my Goodreads goal, let's go. And then I read like 15 books a month and completely burn myself out. So I don't think I will be continuing at that pace at all, but I think that's totally fine. This is my channel and I don't have to keep up with the amount of books that other booktubers read. I have a full-time job and, now I'm doing the bookmarks thing and I'm trying to keep up with the Bookstagram thing. So I'm pulled in quite a few directions. So if I don't read as many books as anyone else does, I think it's fine. I'm on here to talk about the books that I read and share about them so that I can build community and just share about things that I like. Let's get into the books that I've read. There's a couple of hard copy books that I owned and some that I read from my library and as ebooks. Yeah, let's get into it. So the first book I want to talk about from March is I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston, and this book is about Shara Wheeler and our main character, Chloe Green. Yeah, Chloe Green. Please bear with me. I am going to forget every character's name. It has been quite a while. I remember plots, but I don't remember names. I'm not good with them, so if I refer to someone as main character or secondary character, please just forgive me. I think it's more important that I remember the main ideas of the plots and how to talk about the book rather than remembering a character's name. But anyway, so we have a story where Chloe Green and Shara Wheeler are academic rivals at an academy in the Midwest. And one day, Shara kisses our main character, Chloe, and walks away and disappears. And then Chloe finds a note that is cryptic and sort of alluding to clues, and she figures out that it's kind of a game to figure out where Shara has gone. And through collecting these notes and moving forward, she connects with Shara's old friends, and they become kind of a tight-knit group of unlikely friends because it's Shara's boyfriend who is a jock, and it's Shara's kind of maybe a guy who is sort of alluded to as having a crush on her, who's kind of the artsy outcast kid, and then we have Chloe, who's kind of like the academic overachiever. So they're an unlikely group of friends, and they come together to kind of figure out where Shara is, why she left, and what it means to each of them. This book, I don't want to go any further talking about the plot because I think it will spoil it, but how I felt about it is that this book kind of feels like it's in two halves. We have the first half where Shara disappears, and it's this mystery about finding her and figuring out why she left, and I felt like that part of the book went on a little too long, and I was starting to lose interest. I did put this book down for a little while, but then the second half of the book was so strong, it saved the entire book for me. I did end up giving this 5 stars based on the strength of the second half alone, because the second half of the book is, and Casey McQuiston themselves kind of says this, but it's a John Hughesian kind of teenage romp through high school, figuring out who you are and what that means, and helping your friends and helping, you know, your community and things like that. And it's just so wholesome and fun and wonderful to read that, yeah, the strength of it alone saved this entire book. I would say if you kind of put this down because you got kind of tired of the mystery surrounding Shara, I would say push through, because it does become way, way more than that, and I think it's an important read. I think the overall message of the book is quite important, and yeah, I would say I didn't enjoy this as much as, well, I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I loved One Last Stop, and this, I would say, I do love it, but again, it was kind of inconsistent because the first half was, it dragged on a little too long. But again, like, definitely it's a 5-star book. It is different from their other 2 books, but I would say definitely check this out. So next we have Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and I hauled this book months ago, again, I think in March, and I think in that video I talked about how people were confused whether this was YA or adult that read as YA, and I still don't know because it definitely reads as a YA, but it caught me at the right time because I really, really enjoyed this book. It's by Sue Lin Tan. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but this book concerns, what is her name? Xingyan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Xingyan is the daughter of the moon goddess, and she grows up on the moon with her mother Chang'e, the moon goddess, and she is sort of kept in the dark about her origins and about who she is, and the fact that she has powers, the fact that she is significant to the, I can't remember her name, but I know that she's like the empress of the sort of kingdom of the gods. I can't remember her name or her title, but one day she sort of gets curious about these innate powers that she has. She kind of, I think she thinks of it as like the light surrounding her, and she reaches for this power, you know, in her clumsy sort of way. And this sends a signal to the Empress because there is this spike of power coming from the moon that should not be coming from the moon, since they don't know that Xingyan exists. So they think that Chang'e is up to something on the moon. So they send guards, and the Empress herself comes to visit the moon to kind of figure out what's going on. So after they leave, Xingyan's mom is like, well, I've got to send you away because if they find out that you exist, it will not be good for anyone. It will not be good for you. It will not be good for me. It just won't be good at all. So she gets sent away from the Moon Kingdom, and I think she is supposed to be sent to Earth, or she's supposed to be sent somewhere, but she doesn't reach there. Something happens, and it turns out she lands in the Empress's kingdom, and we sort of have to follow her journey as she navigates her way through this kingdom while hiding who she is, all the while trying to figure out how she's going to free her mother from the confines of the moon, because Chang'e is technically trapped on the moon and she can't leave. So we follow her on her journey as she rises through the ranks and kind of figures out how to save her mom. And it definitely reads as a YA. There is a love triangle in this. It's got all the trappings of a YA novel, but it caught me at the right time, and I thought it was very charming and very cozy, and the love triangle surprisingly didn't annoy me. I've heard that the sequel kind of changes that. I haven't read the sequel yet. I've been afraid to read it because of that assessment that I've heard, but I will eventually read it. But I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was really great, and I don't know that if it had caught me at a different time, my rating would be different, but yeah, I definitely gave this 5 stars. I thought it was cozy and charming and wonderful and an easy read, really what I needed at the time, so definitely I think why I gave it 5 stars, but it was a fun ride. I rate books based on how much fun I have with them, and I had a lot of fun with this. So next for March we have The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, and I read this because it's been in a ton of recommendations for cozy reads, cozy fantasy, things of that nature, and this book concerns, who is our main character? Again, I've forgotten names. Mina, yes. So we have Mina, a girl from a small village that worships the sea god, and they sacrifice a beautiful girl, or the most beautiful girl in the village, to the sea god in hopes that the sea god will stop sending these very intense storms that ravage her village and destroy crops and kill people. So Mina is Mina's brother's girlfriend, I guess. I would say girlfriend, but the woman that her brother is in love with is one of the most beautiful women in the village and is set to be sacrificed. And what happens is that Mina ends up taking her place and sort of takes control of the situation and jumps into the sea and basically says, I will be the sacrifice. And once she lands in the kingdom beneath the sea, we sort of follow her adventures there as she meets the sea god and finds out that the sea god has actually been asleep this entire time and the sacrifices have kind of all been for naught. And this has a lot of Spirited Away vibes. It's very cozy, it's very beautiful. The world building is amazing. It's very fairy tale-esque. I loved Mina's adventure in the underground sea kingdom and everyone she meets along the way. The secondary characters are all very charming. And yeah, I don't want to give away too much of the plot, obviously, but there are dragons and other mythical creatures, and there is a love story, and it really was very cozy and very wholesome and very fairy tale-esque. My sister-in-law says that this was Spirited Away fan fiction. I wouldn't go so far as to call it Spirited Away fan fiction, but it's I would say if you love Spirited Away, you will probably like this a lot. Perhaps maybe a little derivative, but overall, I think it stands on its own, and I thought it was a really wonderful read. Keeping on with the cozy fantasy trend, I read Half a Soul and I loved it. So this is the story of Theodora, known as Dora, who has half a soul because she encounters a fairy, and this fairy says that her mother promised him the soul of her firstborn. So he comes to collect, and something happens, and he is only able to collect half of her soul. And what this does is that it dulls Dora's emotions and feelings, so she doesn't quite fully feel happiness, or she doesn't quite fully feel fear or embarrassment. These strong emotions and passions are sort of dulled for her. And because of that, she's really socially awkward. She has kind of the wrong responses to social situations, and she makes a lot of social gaffes and things like that. And the story really goes into motion when she and her cousin, I don't see it. Okay, I'm gonna say her cousin. She and her cousin go to London to sort of debut in the London season, and her cousin is hoping to score a husband, basically. And while they're there, they meet the Lord Sorcier, who becomes he becomes very curious about Dora's situation once he learns about it, and he wants to understand what having half a soul means, etc. So it's kind of their adventures from there on, and there is a romance between the Lord Sorcier and Dora, and I thought it was a very adorable romance. Some people don't agree, but I thought it was quite adorable. This book is a lot of fun. I thought it was very, very cute. It's very wholesome. It's very cozy. It takes place in Victorian England? Regency England, sorry. And yeah, these are known as the Regency fairy tales, the series. There's 3 books in this series. They're not direct sequels. They're all in the same universe, which is the Regency England universe. But yeah, it does read like a fairy tale. I really, really loved it. The ending, the ending, there is an ending, and there's like a little tidbit, like an epilogue at the end where I was like, oh, no. Well, okay. If you've read this, you know. But overall, I really, really love this book. It made me giggle. You know, I was, really just enjoying myself a whole lot reading it. I definitely want to pick up the other 2 books in the series. It was just cozy and wholesome and fun. Next, we have Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco, and this book is really different from the other books that I've been talking about so far because it's an action-packed book filled with vampires and vampire hunters and a universe-destroying plague called the Rot. In this book, we have our main character, Remy Pendergast, who is a vampire hunter, and he hates vampires. He thinks they are evil, and they kind of parade around as being these human-passing people who are actually monsters. And he meets the vampire lord of the Summer Court named Zidane. He meets him unceremoniously in battle when he is hunting another vampire. And later on he meets Zidane's wife? Fiancee? One of the two. She's one of the two. But he meets her. Her name is Xiaodan, and he's kind of disarmed by these 2 vampires because Zidane is this sort of aloof, snarky, he's a lord, so he's like this annoying, lordly person who doesn't really speak directly, and he's annoying in that way. And then we have Xiaodan, who's kind of like she's the happy-go-lucky, kind of really optimistic, sunshine character. So we have Zidane's grumpy, and Jardin is sunshine, and Remy is confused. But seriously, he is confused because he's disarmed by these two vampires, and he has to work together with them concerning the plague that I mentioned called the rot. And what the rot is this mutation that's taking over vampires that is transforming them into these monstrous creatures that are no longer intelligent, that are mutated beyond belief. Like, they have, some of them have 6 arms, some of them have a gaping hole for a face, giant fangs that reach down to their waist. Like, they're monstrous, and they are moving through the countryside killing indiscriminately, and when they bite other creatures, of course, they spread the rot, so it's very not good. So Remy, Jardin, and Zidane team up to figure out the origin of the rot, and they find out that the rot is part of a bigger plot to kind of overthrow most of the world as it's known. And along the way, Remy sort of, being disarmed by these two vampires, he sort of learns more about them and finds them more and more appealing, and sort of comes to understand that not all vampires are monstrous, etc., etc. So what happens is that he falls in love with both of them. And the reason I picked up this book to begin with was because I think it was Booked and Busy who called this the poly vampire book, which I was like, ooh, poly vampire book. So yeah, they're a throuple basically. And I thought their romance was really sweet and sexy, and it sort of goes up and down with the plot. It's very engaging. The plot itself, the overall plot itself is very action-packed. There's a lot of fight scenes. Remy has this really cool weapon. I forget what it's called, but I couldn't quite picture. I think it's on I'll throw it up, but there's like a illustration of it on the UK version of the cover, which that's not how I pictured it. I don't know how I pictured it, but it's a pretty cool weapon. It's like a multi-weapon. It's got scythes and a sword and knives and all kinds of things, and a chain and Lord knows what else. But the fight scenes are really fun. I mentioned that this book, somewhere else, that this book reads like an anime, and I stand by that. It's really fun. I gave it 5 stars, even though there's there is a scene in here where I was like, really? Now is when this is happening? This doesn't seem like a convenient time for this to be happening, but okay. If you've read this book, I think you know what I'm talking about. But I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a really fun ride, and I'm looking forward to the sequel, which comes out in September, I believe, and it's going to be from Zidane's point of view. So I'm curious to see. I'm curious to read a book from his point of view, because so far he's been so aloof and not really straightforward with his feelings or what he's direct about. He's a scientist, a doctor and a scientist, so he's very direct about his work, about science and things like that, but he's not very direct about his feelings or his emotions, things like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to read a book from his perspective, but I wholeheartedly recommend this because it was a ton of fun. Ebooks. Okay. Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. This is a romance book that I read for my local book club. I don't remember any of the names of the characters, but let's see if I can remember the plot. I believe I do. So we have our main woman character who is a audiobook narrator, and she used to narrate romance audiobooks under a pseudonym, and she was very successful at them, but one day she just stopped doing romance books and moved on to narrating general fiction and other books under her real name. On the other end, we have our main male character who is a mysterious figure who is a romance book narrator. He is extremely successful. His name I remember. His name is Brock. Brock something, which, yes, his name is Brock. This book is very tongue-in-cheek and very funny and plays with romance novel cliches and tropes. So we have our main male character whose name is Brock. He's extremely successful as a romance book narrator, and everyone wants to know who he is, and no one knows who he is, and not even our main character knows who he is. And they end up working on a project together. They sort of, through texting and emailing back and forth, they kind of make this rapport with each other. And they kind of make this rapport, they have this rapport with each other, and they really hit it off, and so they decide to meet. And it's all their kind of adventures leading up to that, and leading up to her finding out who he is. And I can't give away more than that, because it would sort of spoil the central plot. But it's, like I said, it's a book that plays a lot with romance novel tropes and cliches, all the while, you know, feeding into those tropes, having those tropes and having those cliches. So it's very self-aware. The author of this book is also an audiobook narrator, and she has one other book out which I haven't read. But so there is a good amount of insight into the audiobook world. I enjoyed this book. It was pretty funny. I liked how it explored tropes and cliches and kind of poked fun at them, all the while, you know, kind of giving into them as well, and sort of really leaning into the fact that they're fun and necessary for a romance novel. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I gave it around 3 stars, I think. Let me see how much I can actually see that. Oh, I gave it 4 stars. I must have really liked it. I think if I rated it again today, I'd give it 3 stars. There is a subplot. The main woman character used to be an on-camera actress, and something happens to her that prevents her, or she believes prevents her from being an actress. So she moves on to audiobook narrating, and the reason that she leaves acting behind, in my opinion, was sort of ridiculous in a laugh inappropriately sort of way. I couldn't tell, because of the tone of the book. The tone was very tongue-in-cheek. I couldn't tell if this event was meant to be funny, because it was written with more of a serious tone, but it was so outlandish at the same time. It kind of took me out of the story, to be quite honest. I was like, what, really? But yeah, I think if I rated it again today, I actually, since I'm in here, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it that much. Yeah. So yeah, I think if you are a romance book reader, you will really enjoy this because of how tongue-in-cheek it is with romance book tropes and cliches. And yes, you had to start your car right now. I hope you can't hear that, but yes. So I do recommend this if you are a romance book reader. I think you'll have fun with it. It was quite interesting, but overall, it was okay. It wasn't anything significantly like, wow. Next we have All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. This is a YA novel that blew me away. It's quite heavy. Trigger warnings for abuse, for drug use, for drug dealing. This is ultimately I don't want to say, there is a romance in this book, but Our main character is a Pakistani American boy, and our main girl character is a Pakistani immigrant, and we sort of deal with their relationship with each other as they go through life. Our main boy character, his family owns a motel, and right at the beginning of the book, his mom passes away, and his mom is a mother figure for our main girl character. I don't remember their names. I'm so sorry. Let me make an effort. I can find their names. I can't find their names. Sal is the main boy character, and Noor is our main girl character. I made an effort. Okay, so Sal's mother passes away. His mother's name is Misbah. She passes away right at the beginning of the novel, and we sort of go between the perspectives of Sal, Noor, and Misbah in her final days. Misbah was also a mother figure to Noor because Noor is in America thanks to her abusive uncle and his girlfriend. And it's a hard book to describe. This book traces the relationship between Noor and Sal and how they kind of come from different worlds. It deals a lot with being an immigrant in this country, what that means, poverty, like I said, physical abuse, drug use, drug dealing. There is a romance subplot between Noor and Sal, but it's not the romance itself isn't the main plot point. It's their relationship overall because their families are intertwined. Like I said, Misbah is a mother figure to Noor, and how their families sort of are, their families are trying to, well, they're not trying, Noor's uncle is actively rejecting anything to do with Pakistan and trying to be very American, whereas Noor is interested in her culture and trying to retain it. And Misbah helps her, or Misbah and Misbah's family is, Pakistani American, but they are, they speak Urdu at home, they, cook Pakistani food, and that's why Misbah becomes kind of a mother figure to Noor, because she is this cultural figure that lets her hook into her identity and be who she is. Misbah is sort of the only one who kind of sees what Noor is going through, and I don't want to give away a lot of the plot, but Misbah sees what Noor is going through before anyone else does and attempts to help her, but at the same time she's trying to help Noor, she is also succumbing to her illness. Like I said, the book, from her perspective, is during the last days of her life. And these three perspectives of Sal, of Noor, and Misbah sort of weave together to form this beautiful story of their lives. This I lack the words to describe this book. It did blow me away, but I'm just not a good enough reviewer. Their perspectives intertwine to tell this story of these three people, where you learn about Misbah's past, how she met her husband, how she came to the US, what happened with them, what happened with Noor, how she ended up in the US, how she ended up here with her uncle, how they sort of met each other, how these families became intertwined, how their lives sort of come together, fall apart, come together again. It is dark, it's powerful, it's beautiful, it's an amazing book, and I highly recommend you read it, but it is quite heavy, so I would try to be in the right headspace before you pick it up. But I read the Ember and the Ashes series before I read All My Rage, and that was another amazing series by this author, and I read each book I read in one night, and this book as well. I started it, I didn't mean to finish it in one sitting, I finished it in one sitting. I started it around like 11 p.m. or something. I was up till 3 a.m., read the whole thing, knocked me over, blew me away. Very powerful. Next. Ooh, okay, She is a Haunting. This book disappointed me. I really wanted to enjoy this book. I don't read a lot of horror. I don't read any horror, to be honest. And it's not because I don't like the genre, it's just I don't get drawn to horror books very often. But this sounded interesting. This is a YA horror. It is concerned with a haunted house in Vietnam. And we have our main character, again, I forget her name. Her name is Jade. We have our main character, Jade, and she strikes up a deal with her estranged father. Her estranged father says if she comes to Vietnam and stays in this house that he is renovating to become a bed and breakfast, if she stays there with him for a certain amount of time, I think it's like 2 months or something, then he will pay her way through college. So she takes him up on this offer, and they go to Vietnam, and she stays in this house, and she slowly learns that this house is haunted. And this house, of course, takes a toll on her family. This book, the writing in this book was amazing. It evoked this sense of like hot, claustrophobic, like very narrow, closed in, like it really transported you to this world. You felt the humidity, you felt the closeness of the environment, of how kind of it was choking you and sort of imbuing your body with this sense of foreboding and horror. But at the same time, in terms of the plot, it felt like it was trying to do too many things at once. We had a haunted house, we had ghosts, we had a romance subplot, we had an estranged family subplot. And I think ultimately it was just trying to do too much. And even the central haunting, the haunted house and the ghosts, I felt confused by. The central theme of this book is the corrupting influence of colonialism, which I found very interesting. The house in question is a house that is steeped in colonialism, and that's part of where its haunted nature comes from. And while that was incredibly interesting, I don't think it was as fully explored as it could have been, because like I said, it was also trying to do this romance subplot, and it was also trying to do this estranged family subplot. And it felt like none of it kind of gelled together in the end for me. So while I really wanted to enjoy this, I was more left confused by it. I liked the writing itself, but the plot felt messy to me. And overall, what did I rate this? I rated this 2 stars. And yeah, that feels accurate to me. I really wanted to like this book, but it disappointed me. Ooh, what's next? Okay, we have the Fiancee Farce by Alexandria Bellefleur. This is a romance novel with a fake marriage, well, a fake dating subplot, a fake dating and fake engagement subplot that becomes real engagement. Anyway, fake dating. We have our main character, whose name I can't remember, Tansy. We've got our main character, Tansy, who works in a bookstore, and she kind of just wants to be left alone. She's this like shy wallflower. She doesn't really like dating. It makes her extremely anxious. But her stepmother is always like, well, who are you dating? Who are you dating? When are you getting married? Etc., etc., etc. So one day Tansy goes, well, I am dating, and she looks over and sees a romance book and sees the model on the romance book cover, and she goes, well, I'm dating so-and-so. What is her name? Gemma. Gemma, because she knows the name of the model on the romance book cover. So she goes, I'm dating Gemma so-and-so. Well, she doesn't know her last name. I'm dating Gemma. And they're like, who is this Gemma? Why are you dating this Gemma? Blah, 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 blah. And during a wedding that she is attending as a guest, who shows up but this Gemma person, and it turns out that this person is actually Gemma, they don't have her last name, Gemma Van Dalen. And the Van Dalen family is someone that Tansy is actually well acquainted with, and not in a good way. But it turns out that Gemma needs to get married in order to inherit her grandfather's business. So when Gemma finds out that Tansy has been sort of faking this relationship with her, she's like, well, great. You've been faking this relationship with me. I need a fiance. Let's make this work for each other. And it goes on from there. And I wanted to love this. I was looking forward to this book, and I didn't. It's very cookie cutter, and each of the characters, the main characters, felt like a cardboard cutout of a character. We've got Tansy, like I said, she's a wallflower, she's scared of dating, she's very anxious. And then we have Gemma Van Dalen, who's like kind of a wild child. She's a socialite. She has a dark past because she used to do these wild socialite things, but she's actually very educated, and she's very knowledgeable about the publishing industry, and that's her grandfather's business is a newspaper publishing business. This is something of that nature. But they just never felt like fully realized characters. They felt like cardboard cutouts of characters, and so I was never really fully invested in their story. It was cute. I gave it 3 stars because it was cute, but overall, it wasn't really anything that great. No, did I give it 3 stars? I gave it 2 stars. Yeah, like I said, it was enjoyable, but it wasn't really anything to write home about, and I'd skip it. I wouldn't really worry about picking this one up. Okay. Blood on the Tracks. I read Blood on the Tracks Volume 1 and Volume 2, and I didn't enjoy it. This is like the it manga of the moment on BookTube right now, and it's just not for me. I heard that this was a horror manga, and I didn't really know anything else about it, but what it is a manga about psychological abuse and the horrors of psychological abuse, and personally, I just don't want to read about psychological abuse. So rather than this being a review on the quality of the manga, I will just simply say that this isn't for me, and I won't be continuing the series just because it's not for me. I don't want to read about psychological abuse. Okay, the next book we have is, Paris Daillencourt is About to Crumble by Alexis Hall, and I gave this book 3 stars. I would say it's more like a 3.5 stars. It's a romance between Paris Daillencourt and our second main character, Tarek Hassan. So Paris Daillencourt ends up on this baking show, which is basically like the it's the Big British Bake Off, but it's called something else. It's called like, I forget what it's called. Something. It's not in the description. But he ends up on this show that is basically the Great British Bake Off. And while he's there, he accidentally opens a fridge door and hits a fellow contestant in the face. And that's how he meets Tarek. And so Paris and Tarek strike up this friendship that sort of becomes more of a romance, and the book follows their journey. And what makes this book interesting is that Paris Daillencourt is an extremely anxious person, and we are in his head for this entire book, and we get to see how all his thoughts spiral in anxious directions. Like, he thinks that if he takes the train to go meet Tarek, that he will end up getting lost and ending up somewhere where there are muggers and murderers, and they will kill him, and then he will never be able to get home, which means he won't be able to get to his cat, and then his cat will die, and then, anxiety. If you have anxiety, you know the spirals. I have anxiety, I know the spirals. So it's quite an accurate, uncomfortable depiction of anxiety. Pretty tough to read, actually, especially if you're an anxious person. But at the same time, it's sort of like, I felt, for me, it was good to read because it sort of shows how ultimately these anxiety spirals are I don't want to say unrealistic, but like exaggerated, like they're outside of logic, and it actually kind of helped me realize the ridiculousness of my own anxiety spirals, so it helped me in that way, which is why it kind of ends up at 3.54 stars. I hadn't read a book that depicts anxiety in this sort of really deep manner, so yeah, I thought that was something that was very significant about this book. But the romance itself, Tarek is a gay Muslim man, and he is quite devout. He's saving himself until marriage, and the book sort of examines their relationship and how it goes from friendship to being more than friendship, and what that sort of means for each of them, and how Paris slowly starts to learn that what he has is anxiety, and how that sort of negatively impacts his relationships. And he starts to slowly work through his anxiety, and how that each milestone he hits, like being anxious, how that impacts his relationship, understanding he has anxiety, how that impacts his relationship, moving forward, understanding that he has anxiety and starting to try to work with it and see how it impacts his life and how that impacts his relationship with Tarek. And I thought it was very cute, but I rated this book based on its strengths of how it explored anxiety more than the romance itself. The romance I just thought was quite fluffy and wholesome. But yeah, so 3.5 stars. It was cute. I would pick this up, especially if you have anxiety. I think it can be a little it might be triggering. It might be a little helpful. I don't know. It helped me. But yeah, I really like Alexis Hall's books, and I have their latest book, Mortal Follies, and I have Glitterland, and I have Lady for a Duke, and I have to read all of them. I have to read all of them. I want to read all of them. Alexis Hall's books they span quite a lot of genre. They are romance books at their heart, but they span quite a lot of genres. For instance, Lady for a Duke, I believe, is Victorian, and this is more contemporary fiction. So I would say that if you tried a book from Alexis Hall, I would try another book from Alexis Hall, because it will probably be in a different genre and you might like it better or you might like it less. I don't know. But yeah, I thought this book was cute and it's worth a pickup. Okay, yeah, that is it. That is every book I have read between March and now, and it's not a lot, but seeing them collected here together, I feel like I read a significant amount of books. It's better than the last slump I was in where I read one book in an entire year. So it's way better than that. But I am back in the swing of things. I am currently reading Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I am reading God Killer, and I'm reading Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen. Yes, I'm in all of those books. I just finished Kaikei, I read Yellowface. So yeah, I am back into the swing of things, and I wanted to plug once again my bookmarks. They are cute and silly. We have frog butt. We've got llamas, we've got corgis, we've got more serious, well, not serious, more pretty illustrations, but we've got quite a bit of a range, and I'm going to be uploading more designs soon. Again, the Etsy will be linked in my description box below, so will my new Instagram account. I will see you again next time, hopefully soon, hopefully for a June wrap-up. I am thinking of doing a video where I read all of Emily Henry's books and see if I like them at all. Another will I hate it video, basically. It's either Emily Henry or Sarah J. Maas. Maybe both. I don't know. I also have Fourth Wing, so I could probably weigh in on that whole kerfuffle. But yeah, I will see you soon, hopefully. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.